We're going to talk about complementary and supplementary angles. Okay, we're still on the GCO9 standard, and the learning goal for today, or for this lesson, is I can calculate the complement and supplement of an angle. So supplementary angles are two angles whose with a sum of 180 degrees. Okay, so supplementary angles, we have an angle here. Are two angles that have a sum of 180 degrees. So if you know that this angle here is 60 degrees, if we know that this angle here is 60 degrees and this angle over here is 120 degrees, then we can say that these two angles are supplementary angles. And we know that because supplementary means that they have a sum of 180 degrees. And 120 plus 60 equals 180. Okay, these also happen to be adjacent angles, and they also happen to be a linear pair. Okay, so supplementary angles can be adjacent angles, and they can also be linear pairs, because a linear pair means it forms a straight line, two adjacent angles that form a straight line, and a straight line is actually 180 degrees. And so some people remember, because of the S, meaning straight line, and then straight line has a sum of 180 degrees. Okay, but supplementary angles do not have to be adjacent angles. If I ask you if these angles here, and my angles aren't going to be, I'm not using a protractor or anything to make my angles, but if I have that this angle here is 140 or 40 degrees, and I'm giving you that this angle here is 140 degrees, they're not adjacent angles, but together their sum is 180 degrees. Therefore, together these are supplementary angles, because the sum of 40 degrees plus 140 degrees equals 180 degrees. So it's just two angles with a sum of 180 degrees. They can be adjacent angles, but they don't have to be adjacent angles. Sorry about that. Okay, so supplementary angles are just simply two angles that have a sum of 180 degrees. Oftentimes you'll get the question that says, if the measure of an angle is 30 degrees, what is the supplementary angle? Okay, so if the measure of an angle is 30 degrees, what would be the supplementary angle? Well, you would simply say 180 minus 30, and you would get that the supplementary angle would equal 150 degrees. Okay, so whenever we're talking about supplementary angles, we know that the sum is 180 degrees, and if you're looking for the supplementary angle, you would simply say it's 180 minus whatever the measure of the angle is. Okay, so if the measure of the angle was 30, your supplementary angle would equal 150. And if the measure of your angle was 62, then you would simply subtract 62 from 180 to figure out what that supplementary angle is. Okay, complementary angles. Complementary angles have a sum of 90 degrees. Okay, some people remember this as C means corner. And when we're talking about a corner, we've got that box. And the box, we know, indicates that two lines are perpendicular to each other, but it means that the angle is 90 degrees. Okay, so we know that two lines that form a perpendicular angle, or that form two lines, yes, that are perpendicular to each other have a 90-degree angle. Sorry about that. And so C means corner. I like to be a little cheesier on this, and I'm like, hey, you're all right. Like, that's kind of a compliment, right? You're all right. So I would say that that's the way I remember it, but you can remember it however you would like to. I like the, hey, you're all right, kind of with a thumbs up. So that's my cheesiness for today. But two angles that have a sum of 90 degrees. Okay, so if we are given that we've got a box here, and we're given that this here, so that box indicates we've got a 90 degree, right, or a right angle, and we're told that this is 35 degrees, then you can simply find the extra angle here, this unknown angle, by saying 90 minus 35 degrees, and 90 minus 35 degrees is 55 degrees. So you can find your unknown angle if you're given that the pair of angles here are complementary angles, and that one of the angles is given, you have that given measure. Okay, so complementary angles could be adjacent angles, meaning they have that common vertex and a common side, but they don't have to be. Okay, just like with supplementary angles. If you're given that you've got this angle here of 30 degrees, then we can find another angle and say, oh, the complementary angle would be 60 degrees. And we know that because 30 degrees plus 60 degrees equals 90 degrees. Okay, so adjacent angles, complementary angles could be adjacent, but they don't have to be adjacent angles. They can just be two random angles on a page. So if you're given an angle, say you're given the measure of an angle is 36 degrees, you can find what is the complementary angle. Well, the complementary angle would be 90 minus x. So we know that we would say 90 minus 36, and you would get that that equals 54 degrees. Okay, so whenever you're looking for the complementary angle, you're simply taking the measure of the angle and subtracting it from 90 degrees. Now, the trickiest part of these are word problems. Okay, so the way I like to do the word problems when we're talking about complementary and supplementary angles is that whenever you see, and I'm going to try to write really clear here, whenever you see the word supplementary, replace that, just to begin with an S. Okay, and we know that S means supplementary, but we also know that it means 180 minus X. And whenever you see the word complement or complementary, I would first replace the complementary with a C, and then when I would substitute a 90 minus X, because I know we're talking about a complementary angle. Okay, again, the word is means equals, so you're going to replace the word is with an equal sign. And I would start there. Oh, and when you see the word the measure of an angle, I would replace that with your x. Okay, so if we look above, we've got the complement of an angle is, and so the complement we're going to write as a C, and the is means equals. And then we've got 3 times, I meant to do that in blue, the measure of the angle. Okay, so 3 times means we're multiplying something by 3. And the measure of the angle is x, so 3x. Okay, so that would be the way I would start my equation. Okay, and then I would replace complementary or complement with 90 minus x, and that equals 3x. And then I would use my orders of operation to solve my problem. So first I would add x to each side. and I get 90 equals 4x, and then I would divide each side by 4, and I get that x equals 90 divided by 4. Off the top of my head, it's too early for me this morning. It is 22 and a half, 22.5 degrees. Okay, so if the measure of my angle, remember that's what x is, if the measure of my angle is 22.5 degrees, then the complement or the complementary angle would be 90 minus 22.5, or 67.5 degrees. Okay, so I think these are the trickiest problems, but I think when you break them down, they're not nearly as bad as they could be. So again, when you see the word complement or complementary, I would just write that as a C in my original, my first equation. When you have the word is, that would be your equal sign, and then the measure of an angle is always x. And then from there, just use those orders of operation to solve.